My name is Billy Collins, and an American poet. Unlike other poets, my work is described as deeply humorous. I do not write about forbidden love or the struggles of life, but rather mostly funny daily occurrences. I am a non participant of social media. I am not much attracted to anything that involves the willing for feature of privacy and the foregrounding of insignificance. So I can proudly say that I've never tweeted. So you will never see me tweet about a great pizza I had, but you will get to know me from my poetry. My full name is James Collins, and I was born March 22nd, 1941. My parents were William and Catherine Collins. My mother was a nurse. She quit her job to take care of me. I am an only child. I was born in New York and grew up in White Plains. My father was an electrician from Lowell, Maryland. I was educated in Catholic schools, and I was all the way through high school in White Plains, New York. Later, I received my BA in English from the College of the Holy Cross. After graduation, I pursued and earned my master's and PhD in English from the University of California, Riverside. I am married to Diane Albright, an architect, and we live in Somers, New York, in a renovated farmhouse dating back to the 1860s. I have mixed breed collie named Jeannie. Suffice to say that is our child, since we have none of our own. I love jazz, a good whiskey, and I am a reformed smoker. I have been a professor of English at Lehman College in the Bronx for over 30 years. I am founding advisory board member on the Century Institute at Lehman College. I have been on many advisory boards and taught and served at many colleges and universities. I have served as a literary lion for the New York Public Library. I did not start writing poetry seriously until the age of 40. It was my fourth book, Questions About Angels, which gained attention from the literary critics. Probably one of my most notable accomplishments is being named 11th U.S. Poet Laureate from two terms, from 2001 to 2003 and 2004 to 2006. During my lifetime, there have been many historical events that have taken place. Some of the major historical events that have happened date back from 1941 to present. Some of these include the Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Brown versus Board of Education, among others. In fact, in 1941, the same year that I was born, the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese military had just taken place. As a poet, I have written many poems about different topics ranging from comedy to love. Some poems have created, in fact, and have been inspired by major historical events like the attack on September 11, 2001, where the Twin Towers in New York City were destroyed. The Pentagon was severely damaged and a plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania from terroristic attack. As a consequence, close to 3,000 people died and many more were injured. In addition, many people suffered family and economic loss, and America as a whole was never the same. As a native New Yorker, I was emotionally affected by the attack. The historical event is known as 9/11. On the first anniversary of 9/11, I was asked to write a poem commemorating and remembering the victims of 9/11 that would be read in front of Congress in Washington, D.C. I created this poem and called it The Names, which was a poem commemorating those that were lost during the tragic attacks on the Twin Towers. Most critics will agree that what sets my work aside from other writers is my use of humor, satire, and the clarity of my poems. Many others have said that my poetry is plain spoken because in it I describe scenarios which are part of everybody's daily routine. For example, in a poem, Snow Day, I describe a town whose daily activities have been interrupted by the snow. Meredith Marion believes I lack emotional depth and has described me as a writer who takes you for a walk on the mild side. Others have said my work will not endure the passing of time, as according to them, it does not allow for multiple interpretations. I of course disagree with the last two points of view. Also, my literary work has been compared to the work of Robert Frost. We have been accused of being simple but appealing. I would agree with these statements by the critics. And what's more, I am proud of being described in such ways. I believe that poetry does not have to be something so formal that it almost requires etiquette to be followed. Neither should it be so mysterious as if the poet wanted to hide the meaning of his poems. On the contrary, poetry must be written so that people can experience the joy of reading poetry, although some critics use this against me by calling my poems too accessible. In interviews, I was often asked the question like, when and how did you get into poetry? When did you write your first poem, and what inspires you? Questions often become mundane after a while but produce the same responses. I had this early memory and I saw a sailboat taking its way up the East River, and immediately I had a literary response to it. I mean, I could have been seen it. I don't know. Influences are plentiful and not necessarily used to create poems. Probably one of the most useful influences I had growing up was a little penguin paperback, which I still have, called the New Poetry. I used it all through high school. It was edited by A. Alvarez and was my first exposure to poems like Tom Gunn, Ted Hughes, Philip Larkin, Charles Tomlinson, and others. My work is not influenced by certain people so much as it is by everyday occurrences. However, on one of my best poems was inspired by the horrific event of 9/11. It was commissioned by Congress to write a poem commemorating the memories of many people that lost their lives on the fateful date. My poetry is most referred to as accessible poetry. In my early writing, I wrote very difficult poetry and I was guilty of not really understanding what I was talking about. I was writing poetry as I had read it and though it should be written. However, there was no connection to thought, no feelings or experiences. I decided to go with life. It was easier to understand to the point and being simple minded. The simplicity of my writing is evident in the titles of my poems. For example, A Portrait of a Reader with a Bowl of Cereal. It is about breakfast. Forgetfulness, I think we can all relate to forgetting things of importance. I guess you could say I have many accomplishments in my life. The person I am today is the product of the life experiences. Most would say my work reads the same way. It may be simple, but it relates to everyday life and makes people laugh. Is there anything better than that?
The names for the victims of September 11th and their survivors. Yesterday, I lay awake in the palm of the night. A fine rain stole in, unhelped by any breeze, and when I saw the silver glaze on the windows, I started with A, with Ackerman, as it happened, then Baxter and Calabro, Davis and Eberling, names falling into place as droplets fell through the dark. Names printed on the ceiling of the night, names slipping around a watery bend, 26 willows on the banks of a stream. In the morning I walked out barefoot among thousands of flowers, heavy with dew like the eyes of tears, and each had a name, Fiore, inscribed on a yellow petal, then Gonzales and Hahn, Ishikawa and Jenkins. Names written in the air and stitched into the cloth of the day, a name under a photograph taped to a mailbox, monogram on a torn shirt. I see you spelled out on storefront windows and on the bright unfurled awnings of this city. I say the syllables as I turn a corner, Kelly and Lee, Medina, Nardella, and O'Connor. When I peer into the woods, I see a thick tangle where letters are hidden, as in a puzzle concocted for children. Parker and Quigley in the twigs of an ash, Rizzo, Schubert, Torres, and Upton, secrets in the boughs of an ancient maple. Names written in the pale sky, names rising in the updraft amid buildings, names silent in stone or cried out behind a door, names blown over the earth and out to sea. In the evening, weakening light, the last swallows, a boy on a lake lifts his oars, a woman by a window puts a match to a candle, and the names are outlined on the rose clouds, Vanacore and Wallace. Let X stand, if it can, for those unfound. Then Young and Zeminski, the final jolt of Z. Names etched on the head of a pin, one name spanning a bridge, another undergoing a tunnel, a blue name needled into the skin, names of citizens, workers, mothers and fathers, the bright-eyed daughter, the quick son. Alphabet of names in green rows in a field, names in the small tracks of birds, names lifted from a hat or balanced on the tip of the tongue, names wheeled into the dim warehouse of memory, so many names there is barely room on the walls of the heart.